So in yesterday's video, I talked about what my top 10 favorite shows of 2024 were, and in this video, I'm going to talk about what my top 5 most disappointing shows of 2024 were. Not necessarily my least favorite shows or what I think are the worst shows of the year. Honestly, I think it's a little boring talking about like the worst shows of the year or whatever, because a lot of my worst shows of the year are just shows I didn't really care about at all. Like I had no stake in them before they came out, and then when they came out, I was like, yeah, that was TV, I guess. It's a lot of shows that I just kind of watched out of obligation because it was a new season of something I already had watched before or whatever. But I think it's more interesting to talk about my most disappointing shows of the year because they're all shows that I was excited for before they came out for various reasons, whether they were a new season of something I was really, really, really excited for, or it was like a mini series or a spin off of something that I was already aware of. Just shows that kind of didn't live up to the mark, in my opinion. All five are pretty big shows, so they're all from franchises that I'm sure everyone's aware of. And two of them I actually covered pretty extensively on the channel. I think I made reviews for every episode of two of these shows. So yeah, let's talk some TV. So first off, I'm going to talk about one of the three Star Trek shows from this year, and that is Star Trek Discovery Season 5. Now, to be honest, I was actually pretty okay about this season when I was making my videos on it. I think the finale was the only video I made that was sort of negative and wasn't as positive as the other ones. But I think what burns me the most about the season is that it was the final season of the show, but it didn't feel like the final season at all. Now, to be fair to them, they didn't know it was a final season when they were making it. It was only while making the very last episode that they found out that they would have to come up with an ending. So the final episode sort of has a traditional 40-minute season final of a Star Trek Discovery season, with then this extra 30 minutes added on that is like this time jump going through the endings of all these characters and wrapping things up. It felt very rushed and it felt very out of nowhere. But Star Trek Discovery in general to me is unfortunately like the whole show is sort of a giant ball of missed potential, I think. I think throughout the whole run of the show, they've had these little glimpses of something cool or little glimpses of something that would make for an awesome story or something like that, and they just never really do anything cool with it. They never reach those levels of, oh, this is great TV, the way I think every other Star Trek show has managed to reach at least once. And season 5 was all about this like galactic treasure hunt, and it's about them kind of just chasing clues and whatever. Every episode is like a new clue, a new planet they have to go to be like, how does this tie into the wider mystery? And I don't know, that doesn't really scream final season to me. Like season 5 as well, we don't have a lot of the more interesting characters from earlier seasons, so we're left with a lot of the standard stuff. I don't know, there were ideas and moments in the season where I thought they were going to go in a cool direction and they just never did. I remember when I was making my videos, I had a lot of batshit insane theories on what was going to happen and how things were going to tie into something else, and pretty much never came true, which, I mean, that's me for having expectations for something that was never likely or never going to happen. But I do feel like, in general, there were a lot more interesting things they could have done this season than what they actually ended up doing. But yeah, Star Trek Discovery Season 5, I don't know, wasn't really it for me. Next up is a very different show to every other show on this list, but it's also a Paramount Plus show, and that was Knuckles. A pretty short 6-episode, I guess, miniseries. I don't think they're doing another season of Knuckles. It came out in April, and it was supposed to just give us more time with Knuckles and spend more time in the Sonic movie world before Sonic 3 came out, because, in Sonic 2, he's mostly a villain, so they probably wanted to give him time just being like a normal sort of character in this world before we jump into Sonic 3 with Shadow and that. And I know I've pretty much never talked about Sonic the Hedgehog on this channel, but I don't know. It's weird to say I'm a huge fan because it's not like I've played any of the recent games. I think Sonic Mania is like the most recent Sonic game I've played. It's not like I keep up to date on the lore or the comics or anything like that. But I don't know, Sonic as a character has always held a special place in my heart because like the Sega Genesis Sonic the Hedgehog games are some of my earliest like video game memories. The music that is at the end of every single video I make is the Sonic the Hedgehog one like menu music. So it's always just kind of been something like that. I don't want to rag on the Knuckles show too much because, I mean, it's made for kids, like it really is. But when you hear a show is coming out called Knuckles, you'd be right to assume that it's gonna be about Knuckles as a character, but the show wasn't. After I think episode 3 it was, I remember like there was a big shift halfway through the show where it just started being about Knuckles' friend Wade, and then that guy's family and what he was up to and his bowling tournament, and just a lot of stuff where it felt like Knuckles very much took a backseat and became more of a footnote in his own show. After seeing Sonic 3, it definitely feels like Knuckles was there to explain why a certain element from Sonic 2 was not going to be a big part of Sonic 3 because it was away or it was missing. I'm trying not to spoil things, but it's like there was this thing, this plot device, or this big Sonic thing that is missing for a lot of Sonic 3 because Knuckles has hid it away, and Knuckles the show was sort of about explaining where it is and why this person has it now and stuff like that. Like there's a quick scene in Sonic 3 where we deal with that. But for all intents and purposes, my takeaway is that Knuckles as a show was because they didn't want screen time in Sonic 3 to be about a somewhat boring explaining where something is and why it's over here sort of thing. So they made a 6-episode show to deal with that because it was easier. So that's fair, but I don't know. I hope we get that Shadow show, and I hope it's more about Shadow than Knuckles was about Knuckles. Next up is another show that I made videos on the whole season for, and it is The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live. And just like Discovery, I was pretty positive on the season up until the final. I think up until actually the last 2 episodes, I was pretty positive on it. But this is probably the most disappointing show of the year for me personally. It was easily what I was most excited for going into 2024. And I think from either movies or TV, this is what I was looking forward to. The Walking Dead is one of my favorite TV watching experiences of all time. Like the first 6 seasons are just, I think they're amazing. I think season 6 sometimes gets a little muddy, but I think overall the first 6 seasons are so enjoyable, so fun to watch, so intense, so many good characters. And Rick Grimes is like top 5 TV characters ever to me. I actually rewatched The Walking Dead seasons 1 through 4 this summer, and I was like, it's crazy how good some of that early stuff is. But I've been following The Ones Who Live ever since it was a movie, then it was a movie trilogy, and then it was this mini-series. And bringing back Rick and Michonne to finish off their story in 6 episodes was a really exciting idea. And it's so annoying because I was actually in love with the show for the first 3 or 4 episodes. But then those final 2 episodes kind of completely changed my opinion on the whole thing. Episode 5 I didn't think was bad, but I remember being like, this feels different. It feels like they're changing gears a little bit. It feels like the tone is kind of changing. The dialogue feels more like the worst parts of the later seasons of The Walking Dead. The shootouts have no weight to them here. I don't know. It felt like they were changing sort of what they wanted the show to be a little bit for those final 2 episodes. And then I was like, okay, it's just episode 5. There's 1 episode left. Maybe the final episode will be really good. And then the final episode came out, and it just ruined the whole thing for me. It was rushed. It was, in my opinion, terribly written. It was closing out character arcs and wrapping up things that have been in development in the wider Walking Dead universe for like 6-7 years at this point. They just kind of just dispatched them with no gravity. We're introduced to the big villain that's kind of been teased as like the Thanos of the Walking Dead universe, like this guy who's supposed to be sort of the unifying threat for a lot of the shows and a lot of the wider characters. And he's sort of dispatched and just gotten rid of in like an episode with no real sort of time given to it or nothing really developed. I think, maybe if the show was like 6 episodes longer, they could have done a lot more and they could have made this feel a lot better and written this more. But when it wrapped up, I just felt this was disappointing. Like, I think coming out of the finale of the season is the one time this year with TV where I was kind of pissed off, where I was like, that's not what I expected this to be when they have been talking about it and hyping it up for years. I think how the show ended with where Michonne and Rick are as characters was expected. I think that that's where it should have ended. I think that makes sense for those endings as characters, for them to get to a certain place and to see certain people. That made sense to me, but I think how we got there is what didn't land for me at all. And I feel like the consensus online for this show is quite mixed. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe it's just the areas I've been looking in. But I remember immediately after watching the finale, I tweeted out, I was like, I didn't like that. And then I pretty much straight away got a lot of people tweeting at me and being like, you don't understand. Like, if you didn't like it, you didn't understand what the show was about. No, I think I did understand what the show was about. I just didn't like how they did it. Like, I know they've talked about how it's supposed to be a love story between Michonne and Rick. It's all about their characters. That's fine. The writing around that is where I didn't think it was fine. And I don't know, but then I made a video pretty soon after the finale where I just, talked about my in-depth thoughts on why it was negative. And I remember people commenting on the video were like, yeah, I agree. This wasn't what the show should have been. It went downhill. It changed. Things didn't feel right. So I don't know. But yeah, this is the biggest disappointment of the year for me personally. Next up was another show that I was so excited for, but I think just pretty heavily missed the mark. And that was The Boys season 4. And I remember after the finale, I recorded like a 25-minute video where I was just talking about why I didn't like the season and why I think the show was sort of losing its way and why it doesn't feel like the show I fell in love with years ago. And then I remember when I was editing it, I was like, ugh, I don't feel like I want to upload this because I love this show so much. It feels bad to be like being so negative on it at the moment. Um, with seasons 1 and 2, I love still. I think that they are fantastic seasons of television. And then season 3, for most of it, felt like one of my favorite TV watching experiences of all time. Season 3 was like one of the first post Game of Thrones era times where it felt like watching a new episode of The Boys was an event. It felt like it was a big deal that you were watching a new episode of the show. And I was really, really, really into the season until the finale, where, I don't know, season 3 in general to me felt like it was really setting the stage for this big end game, for shaking up everything, the status quo. All these characters were now clashing and colliding, and that we were going in a direction where things couldn't just be put back in the bottle, that you were about to unload a load of things and it was going to be a big deal and everything was going to change. And then season 3 ended with this episode that to me felt very safe, very much taking the characters and putting them back on the shelves and putting them back in the boxes so that you have them ready to go for your spin-offs and for your next episodes and stuff like that. And that was extremely disappointing to me. But in general, I feel like a lot of my frustration about season 4 unfortunately comes from the wider The Boys universe and what they're sort of doing with that and what they're handling. Where I don't know, there's this joke scene in season 4 where characters are at their own version of D23. You know, D23 is Disney's expo where they showcase the next era of, or the next like year of TV shows or the next year of movies. And it's, you know, there's Comic-Con as well where they do the same thing at San Diego Comic-Con where Marvel comes out and has their slates. They do that at Comic-Con and they do that at D23. And The Boys season 4 had this scene where the characters are coming out on stage and there's this big vault like stuff behind them, and it's the big vault slate of the in-universe movies and TV shows, and they're like, and here we have, I know it's like the Black Noir TV show, and here we have Translucent Junior, and here we have, you know, the Deep Tree or whatever. A lot of these things that are making fun of Marvel and DC as a whole, and how they'll have these giant expos to show all their slates off and showcase the future of their franchises. But I don't think those jokes work anymore because The Boys is that now. Like, we have Gen V getting multiple seasons. We have Diabolical, which was like the animated anthology series. We have The Boys Mexico coming out either this year or next year. We have the new Stormfront Soldier Boy prequel spin-off thing that's coming out in a few years. So The Boys jokes, in my opinion, don't work anymore because the show isn't unique anymore. It doesn't feel like the show is unique in making a commentary on the current state of superhero media because they are the same thing now. They're a franchise. They're announcing multiple TV shows and multiple things way ahead of time. It feels like the show has gotten too afraid to lose certain elements or certain characters or certain important pieces because they want them to be around for future spin-offs. Like, they don't want to get rid of, you know, Maeve or Soldier Boy permanently because what if we want to bring them up in Gen V or The Boys Mexico or something like that. That's what the show feels to me now. And that's made the overall show more boring, in my opinion, where it feels like your usual Marvel or DC project now, with the exception that The Boys, you know, curses all the time and tries to make you go, oh, whoa, that's crazy every episode. You know, they try and have a scene where it's like, whoa, that's like nothing I've seen on TV before every episode. That's another slight issue with The Boys for me at the moment, is where season 4, it felt like to me they wanted their that's insane moment every episode. They wanted this moment that would dominate social media for the next week before the next episode came out. And they've always had one or two of those moments every season where a character will, like, you know, in the season 3 premiere where the shrinking guy goes into the guy's dick and then he gets big and then the dick blows up and then everybody's like, whoa, that's crazy. That's like nothing I've seen on TV before. And then everybody's talking about it and posting on social media because it's an insane scene. Those scenes really work when they're like once or twice a season. But with The Boys season 4, I felt like they wanted that every episode. They wanted this scene that it became what the show was about almost, with like they wanted that big crazy hard to watch moment that everyone would talk about, they can put inside the episode and everyone will freak out about. And I don't know, that's not what I watch The Boys for. You know, I don't watch it for those crazy moments. I watch it for like the intense moments where, you know, you don't know if somebody's going to make it out of this scene alive because Homelander's in it. You know, a lot of those things are just absent from the show now, where it feels like the stakes are sort of gone. I was already kind of nervous going into season 4, just based off of how they ended season 3 and based off of how quickly they were announcing new shows and how quickly the franchise was expanding. And I did feel like season 4 unfortunately confirmed a lot of what I was nervous about, where I don't know if this is the same show that it was, but I mean, it is the same show. I just feel like that might be part of the problem as well, is that they're unafraid to change. Whereas in season 1 and season 2, it felt like they were willing to change. It felt like they were willing to do things that you just did not expect. Whereas now, it's expected that they're going to keep things the same. I still am very excited for season 5, though, because I think it's in 2026, because they've said that, well, yes, it's the final season, and also that you don't have to worry about Homelander and Butcher's story continuing past season 5, that they're not going to just keep them around for spin-offs or franchises, that The Boys has always been about Butcher versus Homelander, and that's how the show is going to end. I am happy they're doing that. I hope the show sticks to landing. Last show that disappointed me in 2024 was one of the 4 Star Wars shows to come out this year, and it was The Acolyte. Now, I don't want to spend too long talking about the show because The Acolyte is unfortunately a very controversial show to talk about online, especially since it got cancelled. Look, I'm a Star Wars fan, but I've been trying to steer clear of talking about Star Wars or making Star Wars videos just because the fandom kind of scares me a little bit. I don't know, they're a little intense. And I don't know, it feels like every time a clip or a YouTube video pops up for me that's about Star Wars, or a tweet pops up for me about Star Wars, it's like super, super, super intense with some super hardcore people who are, very much on one side of a fandom and saying things about people or about things that they shouldn't be talking about, just being nasty, just being shitty people. And I don't want to get involved in any of that. I don't want to have Star Wars fandoms wars happening in my comments section if I do make Star Wars videos, which I don't. Maybe I'll make Andor videos because I think Andor is just a really good show. I'm actually enjoying Skeleton Crew a lot at the moment as well. But The Acolyte, I know a lot of people were definitely shitting on the show for not valid reasons, for not good reasons. People were being racist, misogynistic, towards characters, towards actresses, towards actors. A lot of disingenuous ways just to be shitty. They were using agendas to aim at the show, and that's not okay, and that's not good at all. But The Acolyte for me, I was excited for because I just thought delving into an era of Star Wars that we haven't seen on screen yet was really exciting, and seeing a lot of this stuff was going to be really cool. I think it had a lot of potential, but to be honest, I just sort of found the show boring. Like they had these big lightsaber fights in the middle episodes and whatever, and it was still just kind of boring to me. I just found it hard to get invested in a lot of what was going on. To be honest, I do think I've just been falling out of love with Star Wars in recent years. I'm still really excited for Andor because I think it's one of the best shows on TV at the moment, but I do think this is just a universe and a franchise that I'm finding myself less interested in every time a new project comes out. Like I didn't get started on Skeleton Crew for weeks, and that's crazy to me that a new Star Wars show would come out and I would spend weeks until I get to it, despite the fact that I do think Skeleton Crew is really good. But yeah, I don't know. I think The Acolyte is just unfortunately a symptom of my interest in Star Wars as a whole decreasing. Anyway, those are the 5 shows that disappointed me in 2024. Did any of these shows disappoint you? Did you love any of these shows and that you're like, this was one of my favorite shows of the year? Let me know what your disappointing TV list is. I'm very curious on that. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, maybe consider liking, sharing, subscribing. That's always a huge help. Thanks, and have an amazing day.